In this video, I really want to talk about how to master skipping a lure, specifically when it comes to fishing it with a bait caster. You know, skipping lures with spinning rods is a lot easier. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about a bait caster. Now, a number of years ago, I did a video demonstration over on my other channel, BassFishingHQ, where I did a lot of different skipping, and that video went pretty mega viral, like nearly 2 million views on that specific video. And no matter where I've gone in the country, when an angler stops me, they always ask me about skipping a bait. They always ask me that. So in this video, I have 4 tips that I think will drastically help you to become a better skipper. Now, before we get into that video, I just wanted to remind you guys that this weekend, February 7th, 8th, and 9th, I'm going to be at the Columbus Fishing Expo here in Columbus, Ohio. And not only will I be there, but also like some big name guys are going to be there. I believe Mike Iaconelli is going to be there. I know Oliver Nye is going to be there. There's going to be a lot of local anglers there. There's also going to be some really cool booths. I'm going to have my booth set up with my fishing apparel. I also know like Mike Buca with all of his different swim baits is going to be there. It's going to be a lot of cool things. You can make a whole day event out of it if you want. So anyways, I will leave a link down below in the description for that. I'm also going to be doing some seminars at that event, and you can find all that info down below. Now, let's go ahead and get into skipping a bait. Now, the biggest thing, tip number 1, when it comes to skipping, specifically with a bait caster that you should know, is that this is something that takes time. Like it is simply put, it takes time to learn how to skip. You're not always going to go out there and master it. You may go out there and have some pretty good skips in a single day, but to really master it, it's going to take some time. You know, it might take you a full year of really practicing it before you get the hang of it. Now, I have been bass fishing personally since I was like 13 years old, tournament fishing since I was 15 years old. That's over 20 some years that I have been doing this. And I was learning how to skip when I was 15. And so there's a lot of time there where I have blown up reels, made mistakes, and now I feel like I got a pretty good grip on it. But even with that being said, even when you do learn how to skip well and you're pretty proficient with it, every single lure that you use is going to skip a little bit differently. And the rod that you use, and the reel, how that reel is acting that day, all that stuff kind of goes into skipping. And so the biggest thing that I have found over the years is that when I am on a bite out there and it requires me to skip, there's still to this day a little break-in period in the morning. A lot of times in the morning when you start skipping, you kind of have to get used to everything, the weight of that bait, your rod, because it might be a different bait that you're skipping with. And we're going to talk about the baits here in just a moment. But there's always a little bit of a break-in period no matter how good that you get. And by the end of the day, it will amaze you how much better you are at skipping than at the start. So just don't give up on it. Keep on practicing. You will get the hang of it, but just know there's still a lot of time that is needed in order to get really good at it. Now, let's talk about tip number 2, and this actually comes down to the bait itself. Now, you can skip a number of different lures out there, and you can even skip more with spinning reels because it's just easier. You don't have to really worry about blowing up your reel, but there's a number of baits that you can skip, and there are baits that absolutely will not skip. You are not going to be skipping a crankbait. Like, it's just not going to happen at all, so don't even try. But there are a lot of baits that you may think there's no way that that's going to skip, and they will. And all these baits typically have the exact same characteristics as to why they are a good skipping bait. For example, spinner baits and buzz baits, you may look at that bait and be like, no way can I skip that, but a buzz bait and a spinner bait actually can skip really well. And I've actually done videos on that over on Bass Fishing HQ. And the big thing that you need when it comes to a bait that's gonna skip is you need some sort of bigger surface area. You need a soft plastic that has a bigger surface area on there to allow that bait to skip. Now, a lot of days, most of the time now when a lot of anglers fish a buzzbait, they're fishing it with horny toads. And a horny toad is a great bait that has a lot of surface area that can allow you to skip that bait very, very well. If you want to skip a spinner bait, the same thing applies. You have to add on a big piece of plastic on there to allow that bait to skip. Now, over the years, there's a number of plastics I've used. One that I kind of always come back to is like a 4.8-inch Kitech style bait. That bait has a lot of surface area. And swim baits that don't have the ribs will even skip a little bit better, but you can still do it even with a Kitech. But that's very, very important. Even a chatterbait skips extremely well, but again, you want to have a big surface area when it comes to the soft plastic. So just remember, when you're looking at your baits, you want that surface area. The best skipping bait that you will ever find is called the Jackal Bounty Fish. This is the bait that I used to make that video that I was just talking about a number of years ago. And that thing skips extremely easy. It's also a heavier lure, so you can use it weightless. You can skip it with a bait caster extremely well. It is a great bait to skip, but you can skip a lot of different baits. If you're using a jig, you really want to use a jig that has typically an archy style head, because again, that head has more surface area. And then you add a piece of plastic on there. For example, like I love skipping a jig with crawls. Crawls are typically what I use in general, and I will typically feed a Rage Crawl on there, a Strike King Rage Crawl. And if you look at a Strike King Rage Crawl in comparison to other crawls out there on the market, it is very wide. And so again, if you have more surface area there, it allows that bait to skip a little bit better. So when you're looking for baits to skip, think about surface area. Now, the third thing that is very, very important to understand about skipping is that there are definitely rods out there that are a lot harder to skip. And typically, the stiffer a rod is, the harder it is to skip. You know, if you have rods that are, you know, an extra fast action, I am not saying that you can't skip with them, but it makes it a little bit more difficult. Rods that are a little bit also on the opposite end of the spectrum, super whippy, like if they are a slow action rod, you can skip with them as well. Like you can skip with any rod, but it makes it a little bit more difficult. What I really like to have is either kind of something in the moderate to fast action. Somewhere in that zone are typically the best rods to skip. So just remember that you can also skip with braid, you can skip with fluoro, you can skip with mono. It does not matter when it comes to line that you are using. Now, a little bit shorter rods are typically a little bit easier to skip as well. So if you're just getting started with skipping, you know, using something around 7 foot is probably what I would suggest. A 7'6", sure, you can skip with that, absolutely, but it's not as easy as a 7-foot rod. So the rods that I primarily skip with now are like 7'2", 7'3", because I've done it a lot. I can do it a little bit better with the longer. I'm proficient with the longer rod, and I do ultimately like a little bit longer rod because I think it helps you to get more, helps you to load the rod better and really whip that thing up in there. But getting started, like a 7-foot rod to me is really what you want. Now, when it comes to the reel, look, I have skipped with $29 plastic gear ratio reels that I don't even know the brand of them. And I've skipped with reels that are, you know, $279 before. I don't really believe in reels that are like over $300 because I've never seen a reel that's $400 or $500 be that much better than a $150 reel, if I'm being honest with you guys. But anyways, you can skip with a number of different reels. The biggest thing that I do suggest when it comes to the reel is using a piece of tape on that reel, using a piece of electrical tape. And the big thing is that almost every time that you are skipping a bait, you are not making much more than about a 50 or 60 foot cast. Like most of the time when we're skipping, it's pretty close quarters. It's not like you're making, you know, a 30 yard, 90 foot, 100 foot cast and skipping it. It's pretty close quarters. So the best thing that you can do is when you get to the body of water, before you start skipping, cast that reel out about 50, 60 feet, cast the bait about 50, 60 feet away, take a black piece of electric tape and put it on the reel. That way, when you blow that reel up, because it's inevitable, it's gonna happen, you don't waste that entire spool. It will only kind of go back to that piece of tape. It's just a really easy thing to do, and it can help you if you're really serious about now like dialing in your skipping game. So anyways, setting up the reel is something that it really requires me to show you the reel to do. So I'm actually gonna leave the link to the video demonstration that I did a number of years ago. I go a little bit more into the reel, also show you on the water how to skip with different skipping styles. So if you guys enjoyed this video, you will like that one as well, and I will see you guys tomorrow.